Hello everybody and welcome to Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack and today we're going to be taking a look at Mew VMAX, one of the best decks coming out of Fusion Strike. It looks to be a very top tier archetype immediately coming out of the set with a lot going for it. So let's jump straight in. But just before we do, check out the Potown store using code Omnipoke for an extra 5% off your order. They even have celebrations codes and I'm sure they'll have Fusion Strike codes very shortly as well. So, the basic concept of Fusion Strike, basically Mew VMAX can copy any Fusion Pokemon's attacks. There's a variety of good Fusion Pokemon that we potentially want to attack, but primarily we're going to be using the attacks of Genesect and Latias. The deck has high tempo, can be immune to VMAXs, has inbuilt healing, and all of the damage is scalable. So yeah, it's very flexible, and it looks to be really solid. So, Pokemon, keeping things pretty simple, we have a 4-3 Mew VMAX line. All of these Pokemon you'll notice are Fusion Pokemon. That's because Genesect wants all of our Pokemon to be Fusion Pokemon. But yeah, the Mew VMAX, or the Mew V at least, let's start with, has the Energy Mixer attack, which isn't too shabby. It lets you search for a deck for an energy and attach it to one of your Fusion Pokemon. So that can help in setting up other Mews or Genesects or whatever. We then have the Psycho Jump attack for 70 damage for 2 energy that lets you shuffle this card and all the cards attached to it back into the deck. So that's kind of that inbuilt healing part where you essentially can tank a hit with a Mew VMAX, then just copy a Mew V on the bench's Psycho Jump and be able to heal all of that damage off, which seems very good in a format where there's so many 2-shots right now. Onto the Mew VMAX, Cross Fusion is the big attack of the Mew VMAX with the just for 2 colors energy. It lets you choose an attack on one of your bench Fusion Pokemon and use it as an attack. So that's how you can copy Psycho Jump. Sorry, you can also copy Genesect's Techno Blast. You can copy Dyna Barrier on Latias. You can even copy Passionate Drop on Oricorio. All of these attacks do very different things, but can be very important in different situations. Basically, you've got your big damage attack with Genesect, you've got your immunity with Dyna Barrier, you've got your Passionate Drop, which kind of works as, you put 5 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon, so that kind of works as being able to finish off KOs without the use of gusting or anything like that, or multiple KOs at once. And then the Mew also has the Max Miracle attack for 2 Psychic Energy that does 130 and goes through all effects on your opponent's Pokemon, so things like Zamazenta, Decidueye, all of that stuff is ignored, which is really good because it means that we don't even need to run things like Phoebe and stuff. Genesect V is the backbone of the deck, the engine, with the Fusion System attack. Once during a turn, you may draw cards from your deck until the number of cards in your hand equals the number of Fusion Pokemon you have in play. So that's right, if you have 4 Genesects in play plus 2 other Fusion Pokemon, you can draw until you have 6 cards in hand 4 times per turn. That's bananas. That's basically the strongest draw engine we've ever seen on a basic. Maybe even we've ever seen, like, period. It's just insanely strong. And yeah, that's why we want to run loads of Fusion Pokemon, because we want to see all of these Pokemon, bench them all basically immediately, draw lots and lots of cards, and it means that we can play a really interesting supporter engine as well, because we have so much less reliance on draw supporters. It means that we get to play some funkier supporters. As well as that, we have Techno Blast for 210 for 3 energy, and this Pokemon can't attack during your next turn. That can be also used by the Genesect itself in the list, because we are running plenty of Rainbow style energy, which is important because there will be certain matchups where you basically want to be sort of a 2-prize or a 2-prize matchup rather than getting the Mew VMAXs out. Also, it is important to note that this also means when Mew copies Techno Blast, it can't attack during your next turn, but luckily Mew has free retreat, which is very good. The only other thing to note about Mew that I also forgot was the fact that it has Dark Weakness, which isn't great. We already have Umbreon as basically the partner of one of the best decks in format, and that deck looks to be getting more Dark type support, but in general that's one of the only sort of real issues with that weakness and with the card in general. Latias, essentially, well, it has the red assist ability, but we're not really using it for that. We're using it for Dyna Barrier, which for 3 energy or 2 with Cross Fusion does 70 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon VMAX. So that's that immunity there. We get to become immune against other VMAX decks, which is really important, because it means that they have to not evolve their VMAXs, which is great because we can then just Techno Blast into them, or Gust around us, which is also really good because, you know, that means they're not dealing with the main threat that usually is the Mew that's doing huge amounts of damage or being able to become immune or heal or anything like that. So forces more boss out of them and forces our opponents to play differently, playing into the Techno Blast, which is nice. Obviously, there are ways around this. Things like other Max Miracles or other effects like Max Miracle will go around Dino Barrier, but regardless, still a incredibly strong attack. And then finally, we have Oricorio, which has the Fervent Lesson ability. This is as long as this Pokemon is in play, your fusion Pokemon take 20 less damage from your opponent's attacks. So it's just a nice bench sitter. It's a fusion Pokemon, so we want it in the deck. We naturally want more fusions in the deck. So being able to reduce the damage is very important. Well, it can be important. It's better than basically every other free basic fusion Pokemon. So you might as well get the inbuilt -20. We can even copy Passionate Drop as well, that puts 5 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. So if you've missed out on a KO by just a couple of damage counters or need to set one up or something like that, we can even use Passionate Drop if needs to. If we need to. Onto the trainers, we have 4 Quick Ball, 3 Fog Crystal, and 2 Evo Incense, as well as one of the new Battle VIP Pass. Essentially, the first 3 are primarily just for making sure we can have access to a lot of Pokemon in the early turns. We want to see as many basic Pokemon early on, so Quick Balls and Fog Crystals get, well, the Fog Crystals only get Mew, but it means that we can save our Quick Balls for things like Genesects to try and fill our board out. Evo Incense is obviously still very important because we need to be able to find the Mew VMAX since that's our attacker. But then the Battle VIP Pass is a new card from Fusion Strike that I think works really well as a one-off, especially in this kind of deck when you see the engine that we're using. This card says you can only use this card on your first turn, search your deck for 2 basic Pokemon and put them onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. So obviously after turn 1 this is a completely dead card, which can be awkward. There can be times where, because obviously you want to reduce your hand size for Genesect to draw lots of cards, this can be really detrimental because you just can't play it. You have to find another way of discarding it or get it into the deck or something like that. You know, we don't really want to see this in the late game, but in the early game it's so powerful. It can translate into basically always 2 Genesects for the majority of the time, which can be upwards of 6, 7, maybe even 8 cards on turn 1. So if you are able to draw this on your first turn, it's great because it can translate to a lot of draw support. But also if you're going second, we are playing a Peony engine to spoil the surprise, which means that you can tutor for this, which again, because Peony reduces your hand to 0, that guarantees you at least 6 cards, potentially probably even more, close to maybe even 10, which is crazy. So I think as a one-off it's very important and a really nice card to have. We have 1 Air Balloon and 2 Switch. Obviously, because Mew has free retreat, we're able to move in between 2 Mews fairly easily, and because it only costs 2 to attack, it's not too likely that we're not able to just switch in between the 2 Mews and sort of cycle them. But there will be situations where we go heavier on the Genesect, or we're even using Genesect as an attacker, where we need to switch into a Genesect and then move back out. So switch is really important for that. Obviously, Air Balloon also helps us in that kind of aspect where we can pop it on a Genesect and it's then got free retreat. Similarly, Cross Switcher is a new card that also helps us switch out, but also is a good gusting card. Cross Switcher says you have to play 2 at once. If you play 2, you get to choose one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and bring it up to the active, then switch your active to one of your bench. So this is really good for gusting specific targets, taking out engines, taking out things your opponent's setting up, which is really good. But also resetting Techno Blast is very important. So yeah, just a phenomenal card, really strong. Guzma on an item is insane, even if you have to run 2 or play 2 at once, because we're playing a Peony engine, that's really not difficult. We have Power Tablet as well. This is another fusion specific card that says during this turn, your fusion Pokemon's attacks do 30 more damage to the opponent's active Pokemon. So again, kind of another card that's really benefiting playing fusion Pokemon, can push the damage from Mew and Genesect up to be able to potentially get one-shots, but even just some of these other awkward attacks, things like Dino Barrier to be able to one-shot Drizzles and stuff like that. So yeah, really good. There won't be too many times where you'll be able to go from 0 to 4 Power Tablets in a turn and get a full 3-prize KO, but it has happened in the past and it's definitely something that can be done, so worth keeping in mind. But just being able to weave them in here and there is really nice. And then we have 2 Pokegear. Essentially, we're not playing many draw supporters. We're not playing many supporters at all because we don't want supporters in hand because they clog. You can only play 1 supporter per turn. So once you've played that one, basically that's taking up a spot that could be a Genesect card the whole time. So instead we're running Pokegears because these are insta-play cards that also kind of act as supporters because they can find a supporter in the top 7. But in the late game or even in the mid and early game where you want to draw more cards, they work better as supporters because you can just insta-play them for no effect. Onto the supporters themselves, we have 4 Peony. Obviously this card came out in Chilling Reign. Hasn't done too much, but I think it's finally the card's time to shine because it's absolutely absurd. It says discard your hand, then search your card for up to 2 trainer cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand, then shuffle the deck. So find you a pair of cross switchers, find you a pair of power tablets, find you basically, you know, your switch out plus a quick board, your battle VIP pass in the early turns, your stadiums, all of that good stuff. Really, really good. Yeah, one of the big sort of weaknesses of the deck is the fact that it can, or it does rely on an ability, so Path to the Peak can be quite annoying, but Peony helps you deal with that because you have outs to be able to search for already what is a high stadium count. Now we have outs to be able to search for them as well, which is great. Elesa Sparkle is a new Fusion Strike supporter that says choose up to 2 of your Fusion Pokemon in play. For each of them, search your deck for a Fusion Energy and attach it to that Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. So that's going to help us be able to spawn a Mew out of nowhere, which is really important because it means that we don't necessarily need to be or it's not the end of the world if you miss an early attachment. Obviously, we don't want to have to rely on it. It's more just supplementary additional attachments so that we can get away with missing attachments later on. We're running not the highest of energy counts, but not a super low one either. So being able to have another way to access energy is really nice. And obviously Fusion Energy itself is very important, and being able to put 2 on to protect 2 targets from your opponent's abilities is very good. Running 2 Boss's Order, even though we are playing the full 4 count of the Cross Switcher, of course, Boss is just way too strong. We have so much tempo. This feels like a Victini VMAX or an Ice Rider VMAX kind of scenario where you can very easily do 210 plus turn 2. So just being able to do that on your opponent's lone V or whatever is going to be pretty detrimental to them. It's going to be very important to being able to keep ahead on tempo, and yeah, there will be ideal situations where you're able to just turn to Boss their only live target and basically win the game from there. And then finally, 1 Marnie. This deck draws an absolute boatload of cards, so having a way to shuffle some stuff back in is very important. Plus, there will be off turns where you don't want to discard your hand with Peony or that kind of stuff, where you just want to sort of get to a position where your deck size is a bit healthier, but also you can access some other cards and disrupt the opponent at the same time. Also helps with shuffling Fusion Strike energy back into the deck for Elesa Sparkle as well. Onto the stadiums, we have 3 Old Cemetery. Basically, I thought, well, initially this card seemed like a bit of a meme, but it turns out the Old Cemetery damage that you get with the extra 20 or 2 counters that non-psychic type Pokemon have to take when your opponent attaches an energy to them, or anyone attaches an energy to them, essentially can be very, very important. It can push 320 down to 300, which means with 3 power tablets, you're then one-shotting a VMAX. So it can be pretty crucial for being able to one-shot VMAXs with 1 less power tablet, which will very frequently have to happen because you have to discard a power tablet with a Peony in the early game or stuff like that. So yeah, the damage can be pretty relevant. Also, we just want a high sort of stadium count anyway to be able to deal with Path to the Peak. And then also we're running an Ace spec Stormy Mountains, which lets you basically search for your Latias very easily. Latias is key, very, very key in certain matchups, so being able to search for it, well, having an extra out to search for it is very important. Plus, it helps obviously build up your board to be able to draw more cards with Genesect without using one of your ball search cards. And again, also it just acts as a bounce for Path to the Peak, which is pretty important. Finally, energy-wise, we have 4 Fusion Energy. This energy is absolutely absurd. When it's attached to a Fusion Pokemon, your opponent's abilities cannot affect that Pokemon, so your Pokemon can't be Decidueye pinged, your Pokemon can't be gusted up with Umbreon or anything like that. So basically that means that essentially you're protected from everything but boss and straight up damage, which is really, really good. There's a lot of Inteleon right now, and the pings can be very important in certain matchups. Basically, they become irrelevant in these matchups, which is great. But yeah, and also acting as Rainbow Energy for Genesect is great as well, because sometimes you will be having to attack with Genesect. 3 Capture Energy, because Mew gets away with being able to attack for 2 colourless, and even Genesect has a colourless in its attack. It means that we can play captures. Again, captures work amazingly because they help build your board for Genesect to draw you cards, so that is really, really nice. 2 Psychic Energy, because they're searchable with Fog Crystal. We want to be able to have more targets to search for energy that are insta-play targets rather than upping our energy count. We'd rather have cards that we can play and burn if we want to. And finally, 1 Aurora Energy. This was initially a Force Capture, but we moved to 1 Aurora because 1, it acts as another energy for Genesect to be able to attack. There are certain situations where you have to attack twice with Genesect, and at the moment you can only do that if you are able to attach all 4 fusion energy to both of your Genesects. So this gives you a bit more flexibility there, as well as being able to discard a card from hand to be able to help draw more cards with Genesect. It acts as kind of a -2 to be able to draw extra cards, which is really good. So there's the full list. Feel free to pause if you want to take a quick look. On some tech options, Pokemon-wise, you could maybe look at Meloetta with the Melodious Echo attack that can do 280 if you have all 4 fusion energy on the board. Initially, it seemed a bit better than I thought, than it turned out it was going to be, but it definitely is a viable option. You can easily just pop it in and kind of surprise someone who maybe isn't expecting the big 280. Obviously, with 280, that makes your fusion, your power tablets a bit more live as well, because it means that you can push into 300s a lot easier as well, because you have a higher base damage. Excuse me. We have Toxtricity as well. Again, more fusion Pokemon, so they're not detrimental to things like Genesect. And similarly, it helps you reach these knockouts because Toxtricity reduces your opponent's VMAX Pokemon by 30 HP by 30. So these act as like permanent power tablets almost. I don't think there's space for more than like a 1-1 or maybe a 2-2 at a push, just because the deck already is quite full. But it's definitely something that's worth a try if you maybe want to try a more aggressive build that tries to take out 2 VMAXs with 1-shots instead. Tour removal is another one that could be pretty important, being able to get rid of things like air balloons, big charms, and giant capes, cape of toughnesses, can be very important. Obviously, these 2 prize Pokemon with capes of toughness can be quite difficult to deal with because we kind of soft cap at 210 without power tablets, and then with the power tablets, we can only get through 2 of them, so 3 cape of toughness can start to prove a little bit more awkward. So being able to play a Scrapper or a Jammer, or even 2 of some kind of combination of those, can deal with the capes of toughness and mean that all of these all of these things like Suicune and Zacian, Serena are way more easily knocked out, because a lot of the time you don't even need a power tablet for them. And then there's also Chili, Silent, and Crest that lets you search for up to 3 fusion Pokemon and put them into your hand. This kind of works in a more flexible but less powerful way than the Battle VIP Pass. Obviously, this is your supporter for the turn, but you don't have to use it on turn 1, so it's not a completely dead card after turn 1, which is why there is argument to maybe throwing this in instead. There's also Cramomatic, which is a fun one, that says you can only use this card if you discard another item card from your hand. So that could be spare power tablets, spare cross switchers, even spare ball search cards that you maybe know you're not going to need anymore. Then you flip a coin if heads, search your deck for a card and put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. Normally, this kind of effect wouldn't be that exciting, but the upside is you get to search a card that you want. So that can be an energy, it can be a supporter, it can be any kind of gusting or anything like that. It can be the missing cross switcher or power tablet that you need, or it's a -2 from hand because you have to discard another item, so it translates into drawing 2 cards at least with Genesect. So that's the only reason it's a consideration in the deck, essentially, because it means that you can draw more cards. Normally the card would be pretty terrible, but because of the specific way Genesect is built, it can mean that you can draw extra cards. Matchup wise, you can already see that the matchups look very, very positive. The only bad matchup in our eyes is essentially the single strike matchup. Basically, the Gengar is the complete counter to the deck. Gengar does more damage for each V Pokemon on your board, and we want lots of Mews and lots of Genesects on the board. So Gengar is already a very big issue from its attack, but also our Mews have weakness to it as well. So realistically, you have to be hyper aggressive with your stage with your Genesects in that matchup, and yeah, you really have to work hard in that matchup. And on top of that, they also have Umbreon, even if they're playing the regular single strike without the Gengars. So even regular single strike has a dark weak, a very easily accessible dark Pokemon to be able to feast on your Mews and stuff. But other than that, everything else is very winnable. You can heal off all the damage that Inteleon does pretty nicely and eventually reach one-shots sometimes. But also just you have, because your attack is a healing attack rather than it being a supporter, you have more ways to heal than them, which is one of the only decks that can say that. And yeah, some of the other VMAX decks, we can reach into one-shots. Things like Leafeon are always going to be pretty awkward because you naturally have free retreat, so they're capped at sort of 120, which is horrible for them. Jolteon, again, you're able to heal off their damage. They're capped at 100. Times 2 is 200. You can basically heal every other turn, which is insane. You don't even need to be healing every turn. You can just heal every other turn and you'll easily roll over their damage. Yeah, it's just a very, very strong archetype. None of these matchups seem particularly bad other than the single strike archetype. So some closing thoughts. Like I say, other than single strike Mew, the VMAX looks other than single strike, Mew VMAX looks to come into the meta as a very strong contender. I think it's easily going to be up there in tier 1. It looks to be incredibly powerful. Path of the Peak is one of the only other solid splashable defenses that can punish the engine, which is why we're really leaning into a high stadium count. But yeah, Marnie Path is kind of the only other kind of, well, somewhat awkward thing that can cause issues. But being aware of that and respecting that and playing a high amount of stadiums basically means that we can hopefully mitigate that worry as much as possible. So yeah, this is personally my favourite deck of Fusion Strike so far, and I've really enjoyed playing it. It's got so many options, and I definitely recommend you try it out. It looks to be a very, very strong deck, and one that you will benefit from getting good at and learning how to play, because it looks to be a top tier archetype as soon as the set drops. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Omnipoke. Make sure you stay tuned for various other Fusion Strike content, and I look forward to seeing you guys in another video. Cheers, everyone.